Hey, it's Andre from STM and we're here with Project 86, just preparing it for the next round of testing. For this next round, we're going to be testing just about the full suite of Whiteline products. Now, when we were at the track last time, we basically had the car in completely stock form and it performs really well. We did, however, highlight a few weaknesses which we wanted to address. One of them was just the general responsiveness of the car, and also it's quite prone to severe body roll. That really presents a problem when you're in a S-bend or a chicane where you've got a big weight transfer. The body roll really makes it hard to keep the car under control. Now, another problem with the factory suspension setup is there's very little adjustability in it. It's pretty common with late model cars. Basically, they're just assuming that they roll out of the factory pretty much perfect. That's fine for a road car. It doesn't let us get enough negative camber into the car for a more performance orientated alignment, and we wanted to correct that with some of the Whiteline product. So I'm just going to give you a quick talk through, a quick tour of the products we've fitted, why we've selected them, and what they actually do for the performance of the car. We're going to start in the engine bay here before we delve under the car, and two enhancements we've put on here. First of all is the Whiteline strut tower bar. Now, this car is very light. It's very light because a lot of the panel work on it is pretty thin, and what that means is that the car is going to flex a little bit when you've got it loaded up in a high G corner. That flex means that the car isn't responding perfectly to the driver input, and it makes it a little bit less predictable than what we'd like. So the strut bar just ties the two strut towers together, lets the car respond a lot more accurately and removes some flex. So that's our first modification. The next one is the Whiteline ComC strut tops, which bolt onto the factory shocks. Now, what they do is twofold. First of all, they provide an alignment advantage. They give us the ability to get some more positive caster into the car, and they also let us get some more negative camber into the front end of the car. Both of those are important for making sure that the full tyre footprint is making contact with the ground, and the additional caster also improves driver feedback and improves the self-centering of the steering. The other advantage with the ComC strut top is it uses a much stiffer urethane product, and that takes some of the flex and sloppiness out of the strut top. Again, just adding response and making the car more precise and more predictable for the driver. Okay, moving on to the underside of the car. First of all, we've got the front lower control arms. Now, they have a factory rubber bush at the front and the back of that arm. Again, these rubber bushes are designed by the factory to lower the NVH levels, noise, vibration and harshness. Makes the car pleasant to drive, doesn't transfer road noise into the chassis. We're more worried about getting rid of some of the natural sort of flex in those rubber bushes, so the Whiteline products to replace those are made out of a harder urethane material. They're more responsive with less flex. The other thing they do as well is again give more caster by moving the front lower control arm mount further inwards. So between that and the ComC top mounts, we're expecting around about another 1 to 1.5 degrees of positive caster, which is a pretty big increase. While we're at the front of the car, the next thing we fitted was the Whiteline adjustable sway bar. So this is one of the parts we're most excited about testing, as we already noted that the body roll in the car was probably one of the parts we disliked the most. So the sway bar is thicker in size, which is going to give more roll resistance. As well as the thicker sway bar size, it's also fitted again in Whiteline urethane bushes, which will make sure that none of the flex in the sway bar is lost, so it's all going to be stopping the car from body rolling. The sway bar that we've chosen is also adjustable, so it has 3 positions at each end of the sway bar, and that lets us adjust the roll stiffness. So between that and the rear bar, we can actually adjust how the chassis behaves, and hopefully that's going to let us adjust the balance between understeer and oversteer. So we're really excited to see how that works. Moving under the car, we also fitted the easiest component out of the whole Whiteline catalogue to fit, which is their transmission brace. Now, this is a nice little urethane bush that fits inside the factory mount. It's really quick and easy to fit. What it does is it takes a lot of the flex and movement out of the transmission, so that's going to make your gear shifts a lot more positive. It's going to make the gear lever stay in the same place, and it'll feel a lot more positive in the shift. Okay, moving to the back of the car, and we've got quite a lot going on back here from the Whiteline catalogue. We're going to start with the rear subframe cradle bushes. Now the rear cradle is what supports the rear differential and also all of the rear suspension arms. So the factory bushes, again, just like everything at the front of the car, are designed to keep the noise and vibration levels down, and that lets the whole cradle move around, particularly when the car's cornering hard. That means that the suspension geometry isn't going to remain consistent, and it's going to make the car feel a little bit less predictable. So we've started by addressing how the subframe is attached to the car. So that involves the Whiteline bushes that are replacing the factory rubber. Okay, so that makes the whole cradle nice and stiff, and it's not going to move around. Because it's not a completely solid bush, it still does isolate the car from some of the vibration and harshness. That means it's still quite acceptable as a road car. Okay, moving on, we've also got some bushes here that support the rear differential. Now that's going to make the differential a lot more stable on gear shifts or when you're dropping the clutch. Basically what it means is all of the force and drive is transmitted straight into the axles and then straight into the tyres rather than winding up the diff in its mounts. Getting on to the suspension itself, we've got some little rubber bushes here, or urethane bushes from Whiteline in the trailing arms. So again, they just keep the suspension geometry more consistent under hard cornering and make sure that the suspension isn't going to move around somewhere we don't want it to. The last component we've got, which is probably one of the most important, is the Whiteline adjustable rear sway bar. So just like the front bar, this is 3-position adjustable, so we can adjust the roll stiffness. As I said with the front bar, we're going to be looking at changing the front and rear roll stiffness to adjust the balance of the car. With that, we're expecting we'll be able to move the balance from understeer through to oversteer, and hopefully we're going to settle somewhere where the car's nice and neutral. That's going to make it faster and more controllable in high-speed corners.
We've been testing out the new Nitto NTO1 track tyres. So these are a semi-slick compound. For me, it's the first time I've driven on a semi-slick, and I could not believe the difference. It took me a whole session to actually find the limits of the tyres. It's really transformed the handling, and the car is so much quicker around the track thanks to the tyres.